Well, hello and welcome to this webinar on making appraisals effective. My name's Louise Holloway and I've been an HR and training specialist for well over 20 years. Over my career, I've worked with a range of businesses of all different sizes based both in the UK and internationally. And my passion is supporting managers and organisations in getting the most out of their most important asset, which is obviously their people. In today's webinar, we'll be focusing on how we can make appraisals effective. As I said, the webinar is being recorded and it will be available on my website shortly after the session. I'll start by giving a presentation on the topic and then we'll try and answer any questions that you've got. If you have any during the presentation, please pop them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. So let's get started. The first thing to think about, I suppose, is what an appraisal actually is and what's it for? Well, most companies have them, but they're not really sure what they're supposed to achieve. Depending on who you listen to, there are a number of different aims out there. I mean, according to the CIPD, there are two main uses of appraisals or performance reviews. Firstly, to inform administrative decisions, so issues such as pay, promotion, redundancies, but also to support learning and development purposes. The Harvard Business Review, however, states that they should be an accurate and actionable evaluation of performance and an opportunity to agree development of that person's skills in line with their job tasks. Now, the reality is for most businesses, they're a mixture of both. Generally, they're a formal process which happens on an annual cycle, something like this. Firstly, objective setting. This usually happens at the beginning of the year, and the aim is to agree objectives, agree the support that the manager or business can offer, and identify any barriers to achieving those objectives. Then you have the mid-year review, and this is where we review progress, give any feedback or coaching that's required, and make any adjustments to the objectives in line with the business needs. And then finally, we have the end-of-year review. And this is where we reflect on how the year has gone, how successful the employee has been, measure their effectiveness and contribution, and agree a rating. Now, the appraisal process itself usually takes the form of meetings between the manager and the employee with a set agenda and/or forms, and how well an employee performs against the objective set often informs the level of either a pay review or a bonus. So far, so good. All sounds very positive and sensible. So the question is, why don't we like them? Well, in the last decade or so, there have been many highly publicised attempts by big businesses such as Microsoft, Dell, and IBM to get away from the traditional performance appraisal. So why is this? Well, some of the many criticisms made of them are, firstly, they're nothing more than an HR-led form-filling exercise, which creates nothing more than an excessively bureaucratic, time-consuming and demotivating process, which nobody really understands the point of. Another criticism is that objectives are set in January and then forgotten about until December, by which time they're often out of date. People complain that objectives don't relate to the reality of what an employee can actually achieve, or that any link to pay or bonus can drive the wrong behaviours, or only drives action when it gets close to assessment time at the end of the year. People complain that they don't actually change anything. They focus on 2 or 3 meetings a year and are forgotten about for the rest of the time. That they focus too much on past performance with little attention paid to future performance improvement or learning and development. One complaint is that feedback often comes from a single source, usually the line manager, which can give a very narrow view. And finally, the rating scales. Well, they either don't make sense, aren't felt to be consistently applied, or are just seen as being unfair. Manager assessments are too subjective and not a reliable reflection of actual performance, and generally unfair. With all these criticisms, it's understandable that neither managers nor employees seem to like them or think that they add much in way of value to the business. So the question is, why do we still do them? And why are they important? Well done. Performance appraisals can give businesses an essential tool for employers and employees alike. They can provide a way to assess an employee's job performance, set goals, identify areas for improvement, and provide feedback. So what are we doing wrong? Well, let's address some of those criticisms and look at some of the ways in which we can overcome them to make our appraisals more effective. First up, let's look at the perception that they are nothing more than an HR-led form-filling exercise. Now, I'm not going to argue that that can't happen. I've worked in companies with horribly complicated appraisal processes, both paper and system-based, and yes, there were certain times of the year when appraisals seemed to take over the whole company. Now, if this is the case, you've missed the point of the process. The point of an appraisal is to set objectives and to give employees something to work on, something to help them develop both personally and professionally. It's there to help you manage your business and make sure that everyone is working together in the same direction. The point is most definitely not to fill out forms or hand paperwork into HR. Now, that is not saying that HR don't have an important role to play in terms of the appraisal process. Those forms that they ask you to complete are there firstly to make sure that everyone is getting an appraisal, but also so that they can hold all of the results together and look at the bigger picture across the business. They can help us to identify where there are weak points within the organisation, identify the stars of the future, and any underperformers that we need to keep an eye on. They help with things like succession planning and assessing our training plans. However, the focus for the managers and employees should not be on the forms. The focus should be on the conversation that they're having and what they need to do to drive the business objectives forward. If your business sees the appraisal process as overly complicated or more about the forms than the conversation, then maybe you need to simplify it or spend some time with your management teams on why they are doing it. If you don't have buy-in from them, then the process is going to fail. So what about the next complaint? That objectives are set in January and then forgotten about until December, by which time they're often out of date. If objectives are not discussed throughout the year, they can end up sitting there in a metaphorical dusty drawer until a couple of months before the end of year meeting, when they get dusted off by the employee, who then frantically tries to work out how they can get the highest grade to get the best pay rise. Now, if this is happening in your business, then you are not setting the right objectives, as they are clearly not relevant for the rest of the year. Focused and consistent performance from every person every day is the key to successfully meeting your business challenges. To reach peak performance, it's essential to maximize the performance of all employees and align their efforts with the business's strategic priorities. Now, this is where a clear and effective appraisal system can help. Most businesses have both strategic objectives, so say 3 to 5 years, and short-term tactical objectives, so what they want to achieve over the next 12 months. Now, these objectives should be the cornerstone of your appraisal system and feed directly into your employees' objectives. And guess what? Things change, sometimes dramatically. For example, a global pandemic, and sometimes more subtly. For example, a new product coming on the market or a change in customer behaviour. Only holding appraisal discussions with employees once or twice a year will mean that their objectives do not change with the business needs, which means that you have a team that are focusing on the wrong things, or you render the appraisal system itself completely pointless. Instead, you should be holding regular conversations with people. Talk to your employees about their objectives. Review how they are progressing against them and how relevant the objective still is to the business. Believe me, there is little more demotivating than to get to the end of the year and fail on your objectives because the business no longer has an interest in them and no one got around to agreeing any new ones with you. So what's the next point? The next question is around whether objectives actually relate to the reality of what an employee can actually achieve. As we said in the previous point, employee objectives should feed back into the overall business objectives, which in turn link into the overall long-term strategy. All objectives should cascade down from the top so that everybody is working together. But don't make the mistake that one team that I worked with did, directly cascading the objective from the head of department and just plugging it into the employee's appraisal. Believe me, being a junior customer service executive and having a £20 million sales target just doesn't work. Employees need to see that their objectives are achievable at a stretch, they're relevant to what they do, and reflect their own personal development needs and ambitions. So, whilst a £20 million sales target would be unreasonable, maybe a £5,000 add-on sales target would be achievable. And how does that link with what the employee wants to achieve? Discussing objectives with employees is one of the best ways to set ones that are stretching and focused. What do they think they can do to support the company strategy? Where do they see themselves fitting in? You never know. They may have a better idea than you do. So the next question is around pay, and that the link to pay can often drive the wrong behaviours, or is only effective when it gets close to appraisal time. Well, the link to pay is often seen as the key reward for doing well in an annual appraisal. But there is a lot of evidence out there that it doesn't work. Linking pay review to purely target-driven objectives can lead to employees achieving at any cost, the what completely overtaking the how. For example, thinking about a sales rep, which is better, achieving sales figures but leaving a swathe of unhappy customers in their wake, or missing the sales target but building a bank of happy customers who will come back to you year after year after year. On the other hand, if we do want to reward the best performers with suitable recognition of a job well done, and financial rewards are a valued way of doing this. If you find that your objectives are driving the wrong behaviours, there are some ways in which you can address this. Firstly, you could set some team objectives where reaching a particular KPI or sales target can lead to selfish or grasping behaviours. It can help to make the goals team-based, to take away some of the me focus. Just be aware, that some people may take that as an opportunity to coast, leaving the rest of the team to do the work. Alternatively, you can link objectives to your company values, identifying the positive behaviours that you need to see demonstrated. So that could be teamwork, respect, customer focus. Setting goals around these can help to focus employees' mind on the how and not just on the what. You can also think about the rewards that you offer. Maybe it doesn't need to be financial. Would funding for training or development be as welcome? Maybe you can offer a cost of living pay rise to everyone, but offer additional incentives such as bonuses or development opportunities to the highest performers. And what about the question that appraisals don't change anything? They focus on 2 or 3 meetings a year. Well, one of the key benefits of performance appraisals is that they help to set expectations for employees. By establishing clear goals and performance standards, employees have a better understanding of what is expected of them and how their performance will be evaluated. This helps to create a sense of purpose and direction for employees, which can help their motivation and their productivity. As we've already said, appraisals should be about a continuous conversation. The 2 or 3 official meetings should form only the cornerstones of the wider process. Whilst as an organisation, you may want 2 or 3 windows where objectives are formally reviewed, all managers should be sitting down regularly with their team members to discuss how things are going, if there are any particular successes or problems, and what the next steps should be. Now, these conversations don't need to be formal or even particularly long. The key is consistency. Holding regular, short conversations with your team members about how they are progressing is far more valuable than sitting down with them for 2 hours twice a year. I'd also advise that you record both, you take notes of the conversations. This means that both of you have a record about how things are going and are pulling together your end of year appraisal preparation as you go along. During the meeting, you should focus on observable behaviours. So their interpersonal skills, their customer focus, how well they assist co-workers, how well they take initiative. You should be looking for objective and observable results. So how they're performing against their KPIs. What are the quantifiable contributions that they are making? You should be talking about their skills and their abilities. So those individual attributes. Talk about their selling skills, their negotiation skills, their product knowledge, whatever it is that's relevant to their business. Then we should be talking about their contribution. So the value that they add to the company. And this is not just that they work long hours with no holidays. How much do they contribute? Can they contribute better? And how can you work with them to improve that contribution? Giving regular feedback on these areas helps the employees to understand where they're developing and where they may need further support. You should also focus on what the employee wants. Asking employees where they see themselves in 3 years' time and then completely ignoring what they say just isn't helpful. If they want development in a particular area, and that is in line with the business needs, then talk about how you can support them. You never know. They may be the future star that the company needs in an area that you never thought they would have an interest in. The next criticism is that they focus on past performance with little attention paid to future performance improvement, learning or development. How employees are progressing against their objectives is partly about what they've done so far, but more importantly, about what they're going to do in the future. The most valuable part of the appraisal process is identifying the development areas that your employee has and how that links to their personal success, the success of the team, and of the organisation as a whole. Performance appraisals can help to identify areas where employees may need additional training or development. By assessing an employee's performance, managers can identify skill gaps and training needs. This can then lead to targeted training and development programs that help employees build the skills that they need to excel in their roles. Then the question is that feedback often comes from a single source, which is the line manager, which gives way too narrow a view. Now, whilst the line manager is probably the person who knows the employee best, why not get feedback from other sources? When we're talking about feedback, we need it to be accurate and effective. So it's definitely worth getting a wider view. Who else knows the employee? Their customers, people in other departments, maybe suppliers, etc. Getting a rounder picture of performance overall helps to make the scoring fairer and gives you a more complete picture of how the employee is performing, where they're strong now, where their future potential lies, and where they need support or development. The next question is around the rating scales, and that's that they just don't make sense. They aren't felt to be consistently applied. The assessments are too subjective and not a reliable reflection of actual performance, that they're unfair. Now, how scoring or rating scales are designed is one of the most contentious areas of an appraisal system. How many rating levels you have, what they indicate, and how they're interpreted is always an interesting discussion. To do it well, however, managers do need to be properly trained on the process and whatever scoring system is used so that they understand the ratings that your company uses and how it should be applied. It's easy for managers to accidentally fall into one of the common rater errors, and providing the right training will help them to avoid it. One way to avoid inconsistency in ratings is to hold a review or levelling meeting with the appropriate managers to discuss the ratings that they're intending to award and checking that everyone is applying the ratings in the same way. Now, some managers will naturally award lower ratings than others, and for some, just turning up and doing the job will reap a higher award than others. It's useful to have a senior manager or an HR professional to chair these meetings and discuss where awards are being made, as well as getting feedback from other managers on the employee's performance as a whole. Now, one thing to definitely avoid is storing up feedback on performance for an appraisal discussion. Managers should be giving constructive feedback, focusing on evidence and actual examples, not subjective opinion, reinforcing positives and strengths throughout the year. Nothing said at the end of year review should come as a surprise. Doing this should allow an employee to gain a clearer picture of how they are performing long before the end of year review, and should make the scoring conversation much easier for both sides. In addition to addressing the criticisms that we've outlined above, well-run appraisal systems can also facilitate career development. Performance appraisals can be a valuable tool for career development. By assessing an employee's performance and identifying their strengths and weaknesses, managers can work with employees to create a development plan that aligns with their career aspirations. This can lead to opportunities for promotion and career advancement within the organisation. Performance appraisals can also improve communication. Improving communication between managers and employees is essential, and well-led performance appraisals can provide a structured opportunity for both parties to discuss performance, goals, and expectations. This can lead to better understanding, improved relationships, and more effective communication overall. They can also help to support performance management. Performance appraisals are an essential tool for looking at how well your performance management system works. By evaluating an employee's performance and providing feedback, managers can help to identify areas where performance needs to improve and take corrective action where necessary. This can help to improve overall performance across the organisation, leading to better outcomes and increased success. Employers should reflect on what type of performance they want to emphasise, and managers should scope out what these constitute. There are three broad types. Task performance, so the core activities including in someone's job. Contextual performance, activities that go beyond one's job remit, which benefits the organisation as a whole. And then adaptive performance, the ability to respond to unexpected changes, for example, handling crisis situations, or to innovate. And finally, successful performance appraisals can help support organisational restructures. Should your business ever be in the position where it needs to restructure or make redundancies, then a well-run appraisal programme can help make difficult selection decisions. If you can clearly demonstrate that an employee has had clear objectives and has not successfully achieved them, then they may be a candidate within a redundancy pool, and this can be used as part of a fair and non-discriminatory selection process. So one thing to ask about is, for yourselves, how successful is your process? Check in, ask people. There's strong evidence that it's employees' reactions to feedback rather than the feedback itself that influences future performance. So it's crucial that employees see performance reviews as fair and useful. It's therefore really worthwhile checking in with your employees after you've run the process to see if this is the case. You can either do that in a one-to-one conversation or maybe an engagement survey. So hopefully that's given you some ideas on how you can make your appraisal system more successful. Finally, we have some top tips for the appraisal meeting itself. Firstly, state the meeting purpose. Let them know what it is that you're there to discuss. Allow the employee to discuss an overview of how they think the year has gone. Give them an overall evaluation at the beginning of the conversation and then move on to the specifics. Be direct. Get to the important points early on. Review your goal achievement and the performance behaviours. Don't fall into the trap of sandwiching criticism between praise. You know what they need to focus on, so make sure that is the clear part of the message that you're giving. Actively listen to what they have to say and agree on next steps. And finally, express appreciation for the employee's contribution and active participation in the review process. And remember, as a manager, your role is to spark action in others, to energize people and mobilize them to commit to their own development. Encourage people to see the value in continually developing their skills, their knowledge, and their competencies. You're there to help identify development priorities and review any potential development activities. You're there to ensure that the work environment supports that development and to help to remove any obstacles in their way. And finally, you're there to recognise team members and their development efforts. The research is clear. Individuals and teams perform better when they have goals. Not only that, but research shows that when performance goals are set appropriately and communicated clearly, job satisfaction increases, motivation improves, and there is an increased acceptance in the workplace of the performance management process. Hopefully you found this session both useful and enjoyable. If you do need support in improving your appraisal system, then why not get in touch? Alternatively, you can check out my other videos or sign up for my new online training course, Recruiting People Fairly, which is being hosted via Udemy through my website. Thank you again for attending, and I hope to see you soon.